Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlesector, and we're continuing on with our faction versus faction summary. Now, this will probably be the last faction versus faction video that I upload for a while, because I'm going to start going through the updated Adeptus Sororitas roster, because I do want to start getting some experience using them on multiplayer. I am unfortunately like a week and a half behind because I was traveling to visit some family, so I haven't got to play around a whole lot with them, but I definitely want to transition to go through that, because now my old videos with the Astra not the Astra Militarum, sorry, the Adeptus Sororitas are going to be outdated because they've totally been reworked, and I think it should be good, but I want to play around more with them. But I had several people ask for a Tyranid versus Astra Militarum faction versus faction video, so I figured I would try to get one of these uploaded before I switch topics, because I think there was like 4 or 5 people that asked for it. So I gotta be quite frank with you guys, this is a very, very hard matchup. I think I win maybe 20 to 30% of these matchups when I'm playing as the Tyranids, and that really has to do with either the opponent selecting bad targets or just getting incredibly bad damage rolls. Because the issue you're going to have is the Tyranids do not have great ranged anti-vehicle killers. The caveat to that being is they do have Hive Guards, which are great, but because they're so great and powerful, they're going to be the #1 target for your opponent to kill, and they're not particularly challenging for any tanks to take out. Even infantry can do quite a bit of damage to them. They're not as tanky as you would expect, and then they don't have the best range either. Now, thankfully, you can usually get their accuracy pretty high, especially if you start doing a bunch of synapses to help with that. But as they start to rapidly take you out, it becomes diminishing return, so you have to try to strategically destroy the tanks at range. Hopefully you'll drop 1, maybe almost 2 by the time your Hive Guards gets taken out, and then you'll also have your Trygon burrow in behind them and lock down the tanks, hopefully get some back attacks, flank attacks I mean. And if you have your other synapse creatures close enough, I think for sure if you kill a Rogaldorm with 3 synapse creatures, that'll be enough to get you 100 momentum, and then you'll get a second attack with the Trygon. I'm pretty sure you'll get enough if you take out a Predator, or not a Predator, a Leman Russ, or a Tank Commander as well if you have full synapse bonuses, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm like 85% sure that that'll still work. And then the benefit of that is after you start taking out those tanks, they usually have a bunch of infantry in front of them to act as a screen. And so then as you're blowing up the tanks, if they're just simple Cadian Guardsmen and they're touching the tank, then they'll die in the explosion. That'll just take out wide swaths of the infantry to let your other units close the distance. Now, what you're going to want to use is if they have like a bunch of Demolisher tanks, then you're going to want to end up using things like your Gargoyles or Hormagant or Tormagants to run forward, because it'll just be one shot of the cannon and it'll just kill one model. They don't have splash. Same with the Tank Commander Battle Cannon. If you're going to be moving through a bunch of shots with the Guardsmen or Casterkin, Ogrins, things like that, it may be more prudent for you to use your Venomthropes, to use the Spore Cloud so they get all that evasion, to try to get through those kind of overwatches. Because, you know, if a single model from one of your weaker squads gets taken out by a giant attack, no big deal. But if your Venomthropes start getting killed and one-shotted with each model that you get lost there, you know, it's a 30% loss, and then it rapidly has decreased effectiveness. So definitely take that into consideration. And so after you're moving through, what you're going to want to do is, because the Spore Cloud is what I'm referencing, it'll give you plus 25 evasion, plus 2 ranged armor, so that brings them up to 5, and then 30 evasion as they're moving through. And if they're having their Overwatch set up at maximum distance, then usually they'll have accuracy penalties, and that allows these guys to take a surprising amount of Overwatch shots before they get taken out. And then if you get close enough to your opponents, you want to use this Toxic Presence, or if you're going to do like a Siege Command map, Conquer map, or Season Hold, whatever it's called, you want to just drop this down onto locations you know they're going to want to be on, because that increases the amount of damage that anything that's the enemy is going to take, whether it be 35 range damage, 35 melee damage. And then if they end up getting poisoned, where any infantry that are within 1 cloud of this when it goes off will get poisoned at 15 to 20 damage, that gets increased by 65% if you end up staying in that toxic present the following turn. Now that applies to any other poison, so let's say your Tyrannifex does some damage. Well, I guess actually that's acid, so that's not poison, but your Thornback basic attack here, that does poison as well. So just, or your Gargoyles when they're using the blinding venom, that counts as poison as well. So those things will give you additional damage when you're in there, but you really need to stack these things up if you can, because what you're going to want to do is get that basic range damage, and then you're going to want to move forward with your Hive Guards here, and you're going to want to use the Shockwave Cannon. And you only have 1 attack, so you're going to want to make sure that you have everybody synapsed up, because as you can see, the base accuracy is only 70% and it falls off 15 per tile, and the optimal range is 3. So unless you have a bunch of synapses here, you're going to be missing 1 to 2 of those shots pretty regularly, especially if you're not shooting at optimal range, which sucks bad. But if all 3 of your shots land, you're going to be doing 200 plus damage pretty regularly, because you're going to be getting a 100% bonus damage to vehicles. You're going to get 5 armor piercing, so now these guys are going to be up to 7 armor piercing, and you're going to have a baseline 15% crit chance. In addition to the, let's see which one gives you a synapse, like the Warriors here. They're gonna, and then with that, you're gonna get 225 momentum gain. So if you kill a vehicle, there's a good chance you're gonna be able to get a second round of attacks. You're gonna get upwards of 30% accuracy, and then you're also gonna get 15% evasion. So that's gonna get you +5. But even at +5 with 5 armor, most things are gonna be able to do damage to the Hive Guard. They're just not tanky enough, and because you have to get them so close, almost every tank is gonna sit there and shoot him to get the kill. So what you're also going to want to do is you're going to want to use these guys, and you're going to want to burrow. Now, unfortunately, that lowers their evasion. I wish that really didn't happen. You know, if anything, I think they should get some increased evasion, because they're popping out on top of the, you know, on top of your units, and you're caught off guard. So you would think that would actually make them have more evasion here. Because these guys, even though they're very, very powerful in melee, they tend to actually be pretty easy to kill with most guys, despite having 7 armor. But what you're going to want to do is burrow and get behind them, and then you're going to use your massive sizing talons to get damage, and then that does 90 to 120, and then it also will do bonus damage if you do a flank. So if you can, what I like to do is I use the Trygons, and then when I'm going to have them do this, I'll put on the Catalyst, and what that'll do is it'll heal them 50 health before they go down. Now, assuming you haven't been attacked, you know, that's not going to help you a whole lot, but it is going to apply this 25% melee damage to this guy, and that's not an insignificant amount of damage. I mean, that's almost 20 damage right there with his melee, and even more if he rolls a higher percentage here. And then that'll allow you to get usually around 1/3 of the health of a tank. And with these guys, if you have them all synapsed, again, you're going to get enough momentum if you kill a Rogaldorm, Tank Commander, or a Lehman Russ to allow these guys to then move over, because when you get maximum momentum, it gives you +1 movement, then you can move over and attack the next tank and get another rear attack. And then and you can set it up so these Hive Guards can either get the kill then, or you can attack with the Hive Guard first and then move down with the Trygon and attack. Now, if you, for whatever reason, have a bunch of bonus movement, just make sure you attack, and then if you're going to get the kill with the Hive Guard, you move them back so that it doesn't blow up in your face, because that will cause these guys to take damage. And then what's nice is, if, like I said, if there's any infantry right next to the tank, then they'll all die in the explosion. And then if they have a bunch of Casterkin or anything are surrounding you the following turn, and there's not a high value target that you can actually melee, then you can use this bioelectric shock to do a bioelectric pulse, it's called, not shock, and that does 30 to 40 damage to all units surrounding you, including your units. So make sure that you don't have friendlies nearby when you use that, but that will allow you to do a ton of damage. Now, I also like to get some Gargoyles mixed in here. The reason for that is, you know, usually I'm playing Strategic Command maps, so this allows you to move around the map all over the place. They have 8 models. So again, that's a lot of Overwatch that they can take up. And then when they've get into combat, you can either do a bunch of swarm tactics because they have all this movement. They have 6 movement, so you can stack up swarm tactics with your other swarm creatures. Or if they're badly damaged, then you can use this blinding venom. Now it only applies to infantry, it doesn't work on vehicles, but that will lower their evasion. So if you're trying to get kills with your warriors here to try to trigger your natural killer, which will give you an additional AP and increase their melee damage, that works out pretty well. Or if you're going to use something like the Exocrine, where you're going to be just totally taking out like a Kasrkin squad or an Ogryn squad when you're using the plasmatic buildup with the symbiotic targeting, because that'll increase their accuracy. You don't have to necessarily worry about melee attacks unless there's Ogryns or the HQ units nearby. And then you can use plasmatic buildup, and this will give you tons of splash, and that'll allow you to squad wipe or almost squad wipe some very powerful units. So that tends to be kind of my trick of the trade here. So that's usually within the second turn, and you've moved your guys in. So, you know, I'll have hopefully gotten these guys close enough to use Toxic Presence. I'll be alternating my attacks with the Trygon and the Hive Guard with the shock cannons. And then the following turn, the opponent usually will kill my Hive Guard and will first prioritize taking out the Trygons, because these guys will be locking the tanks down with a zone of control, and then they'll finish up my Hive Guard. Now I may have 1 or 2 left, but they'll be pretty damaged. I'll attack again, destroy another tank, and then the hope is by that time I can move in and start to either do some charge attacks with my Scything Talons with the warriors, which is surprisingly dangerous to vehicles. Ideally I'd like to kill some infantry with the Devourer to trigger that natural killer, which gives them plus 50% melee damage and an extra action point, and you only have to kill 1 model, and that's a 75% chance of getting triggered. So effectively, if you kill 2 models, they're, you know, that's 150% chance that you're going to activate natural killer. So you really shouldn't miss it. And then you can charge in there and you know, do 21 to 30 damage times 3 attacks, and that's how you can really do a lot of damage with these guys. You can also end up using that catalyst on these guys to do even more melee damage. Now I think this is one of the few matchups where it makes sense to actually use the Devourer instead of the Death Splitter, because the Death Splitter is really good at damaging infantry, but it tends to overkill most of their units. Now it is nice if you're sniping down Commissars, Ogryns, you know, heavy weapon squad. So if you know you're playing an opponent that likes to focus on those things, I think that's reasonable. But what you need to really do with this is just kind of overwhelm your opponent. So I think saving, you know, 15 times 4 is 60. That's enough for several of these low tier swarm units. So I think that's probably a better use of your resources here. Now you may live to regret that if you don't get the kill and then you don't trigger natural killer, then you're gonna be pissed off at me. But I think that's probably the most cost-effective way of doing this, because by this time, you know, you'll have lost your most powerful killers as the match progresses. Inevitably you're starting to suffer losses of your warriors, because they're starting to want to focus these guys down to get not only just kill them before they lock you into melee, but also to destroy the synapse. So because of that, I in the past, when I've been doing this, I had been bringing Gene Stealers and try to get their synapse up, because you know, you can regularly do somewhere between 50 and 100 damage with these Rending Claws with their heavy armor piercing, but they're pretty expensive. And so what I tend to have happen is the opponents have really learned to fear the Gene Stealers, so they rapidly will focus these guys down, and because I don't have a bunch of them together, they don't get the Brood Telepathy bonuses enough to really help their evasion. So what I think is actually, these guys do not benefit from the Synaptic Leader trait. They have their own version, which is the Brood Telepathy. So what I think is probably better is just to stick within the Synapse, because these warriors are all synaptic creatures. The Trygon is a synaptic creature, so I think that makes a lot more sense. And therefore I think you probably want to do more of a Hormigaunt build, And the reason for that is these guys have 5 movement, so 6 if you're charging, and then you can charge in and do extra damage. Alternatively, you can move them around, and then you can use the leap ability, which counts as a charge attack against the vehicle, and that'll get you an additional armor piercing, so that brings these guys up to 5. And that, if you start getting a bunch of these guys close together and you're leaping and getting all these swarm tactics going up, you know, you're doing 140% of the melee damage that you would normally do. And, you know, you've got 8 models here, so these guys can do significant damage. The one downside is because they are melee, you need to make sure that you're not stuck where you're charging everybody in there and blowing up vehicles over and over, because again, these guys will totally be squad wiped by an explosion of a vehicle. So try not to have everybody next to each other when the vehicle detonates, but you're going to sacrifice a minimum of one of them to kill the vehicle, assuming they're the ones that are getting the final attack, which definitely sucks when that happens. Because then you're losing that momentum, and especially if you have these other synapse creatures nearby, that's a lot of momentum losses. So what I typically recommend is trying to whittle them down with the Hormagaunts, and then trying to get the kill with something that's stronger. That way they can attack a second time. Because, you know, if you end up taking out a tank, you're getting some synaptic bonuses and things like that. You can get these guys to then be able to do a second attack with the natural killer bonuses here. Then that can really help you do a lot of damage. In the past, I had been doing more Termagants because, you know, they're a little more cost effective. You're saving 5 per model, and then these guys are really good at dropping the infantry. And if you get big groups of them all together, even though it's 1 armor piercing, once you start to get, you know, 140% of the damage going, these guys can even do decent damage against vehicles, but then they tend to just get flamed down. So I think it just makes more sense to have more of these Hormagaunts to really help with the armor piercing killing, because these guys do, you know, maybe 20-30 damage per attack, assuming they're all synapsed up, whereas these guys are going to do way more than that. So I think this is a more effective build. And then the other thing to be aware of is using your command points. I think this is the only matchup that I really focus on using my tier 1 ability. Unfortunately, it has a very small area of effect. I think it's only 3x3, but that lowers, it'll cancel any overwatch. So for whatever reason, he has a bunch of flamers or sentinels just sitting there waiting for you to charge the line to flame through his tanks. Well, you can cancel the overwatch with your tier 1 ability and nullify that. And then you can also lower momentum, because the big thing you got to be careful of is a lot of these tanks are going to be getting shit tons of momentum because they're just going to be killing your units left and right, and you don't want them to be able to surge and start killing things, because, you know, one Lehman Russ Punisher variant is enough to wipe out a Hive Guard or a Warrior Squad. So you don't want it then to be triggering over and over and over again, because that's going to get you killed. And then you want to take down the tank commander, because you don't want them to be giving 100% shots to all the other tanks that are around you. Now, it has been debuffed a little bit, so now they suffer an accuracy penalty, but that's still a lot of attacks. You know, if it's a Rogaldorn, they're effectively getting 4 extra attacks, plus going to have enough to surge and do another round of attacks on you. And then if it's a Gatling Punisher, then that's like 200 attacks just with a Gatling gun, and not taking into consideration the sponsons and the las cannon. So all that can be a real nightmare. So you just got to be very careful, again, with watching out for the explosions if you're going to do a melee squad like this, because you're going to pretty much be losing one every time one blows up, unless you have enough movement to get out of there. And then you could just, the other thing you have to be careful of is you don't want to have all these guys grouped together and then just get flamed, because depending if they can optimize their positioning, one flame attack can effectively take out 3 of these units. And that's the issue I was having with the Termagants, is, you know, with only 4 movement to be able to get them into range to attack, these guys tend to stack up on each other, and then I was having issues where guys would just get flame and kill multiple models. And whereas the 5 has more movement than the tank will have, and then you can do charge attacks or use the leap ability and then move away if you don't want to get blown up by the vehicle when it's getting ready to explode. So definitely keep that into consideration. And the other thing is when you're attacking and you know you're going to kill the vehicle and you have other guys next to them because you want to end up getting that swarm tactics, is after you click and do your attack, you can select the units that are next to these guys that may be touching the tank, and you can move them a square away before it explodes, and they won't suffer the explosion damage. But you need to make sure that you're real quick about it, because in the past there used to be quite a bit of delays where you could easily do it, verify the unit died, and then click away, and you'd still have enough time. But it seems like either I've become much crappier at moving my units, or they decrease the amount of time, so that way you can't wait for it to verify the up 100%. I've killed the unit and moved these guys away. It seems like you need to start moving them before the explosion animation triggers, because even if they're off of the square, almost off of the square, they still tend to get caught up in the explosion. So I think they've definitely kind of changed how that works. But as I was saying, the command point ability, tier 1 works out really well, so you can get rid of that Overwatch and then also get rid of the momentum for the reasons discussed. And then the tier 2 ability is pretty decent as well. Now, if there's a lot of infantry blocking your way, let's say they were 1 square away, then you can do one of those Venom strafing runs, and that'll do tons of damage to the infantry. It probably won't squad wipe higher tier infantry, but the follow-up turn with the poison attack most likely will, if there's survivors. So keep that into consideration as well. And that's also why I like to have a couple of these guys here, as they will help you clear out the Scragglers, so then your Hormigons can get in there. But again, even if they're pretty injured, those injured infantry still have a use to try to trigger these natural killer abilities. And then obviously with your Trygon, not only are you able to use that catalyst ability, but if there are a bunch of weak infantry in front of you, you can use the Stinger Salvo to do pretty decent damage to kill. And then you can also every 2 turns summon in a Termagant here to help improve your not synapses, your swarm tactics, to help do additional damage here. So that's kind of my preferred build now when I'm playing against the Astra Militarum, and I think this is working okay. There are certainly several alternative builds that you can do. If you're having a map that's going to have really good cover, say you're attacking the scrapyard, and you can get this guy, or not this guy, sorry. You can get this guy up on that elevated position behind the crane. That's considered full cover. So you can pop this guy up there, get pot shots off, and then hide behind it, and they can't necessarily counterattack you. That can help the Hive Tyrant stay alive. But what I typically find is at 400 points, you know, that's 20% of a 2,000 point army, and he's very easy to snipe down, especially with that tank commander giving double attacks with the las cannons, you know, the Rugel Dorns, the heavy bolters. These guys tend to get killed, but if you can keep them alive, you know, you can give yourself additional ranged accuracy to help buff up your Hive Guard even further. You can end up using your Psychic Screech if you need to do some more momentum damage to take out those tanks and you don't want to use your command abilities. You can use the Hive Mind, which will give you plus 15 momentum, and it lasts for 2 turns. But the thing you got to remember is if you have everybody synapsed up and they're all benefiting from it, you'll get 225% of 15. So that effectively is getting you almost halfway to being able to surge and get some additional round of attacks here. So that can definitely work out well for you. And then it is a synaptic creature as well, so that helps you. And then it's wings, so it can help you move around the map pretty effectively because it has 6 movement, and you can capture points once this guy gets injured. But really, you want to typically you want to use them to fight. And then once you start suffering losses and you're using more of these melee guys, you'll want to switch him to the synaptic adaptation to the melee bonus to start increasing their armor piercing further to help them kill those tanks more effectively. So he is an alternative. Another guy that I tend to like but I rarely bring is the Tranifex. This guy is good at taking out any infantry that are in your way. Once you start killing multiple Khazarkin and things, you're getting enough momentum that he may be able to surge and attack again. His acid spray is actually an acid, so if you use this on a vehicle, it'll then apply the acid penalty, and that'll do an additional 40 damage the following turn. And if you don't move these guys and you get them right next to the opponent, then they'll have to move away, and you'll give you an opportunity to do a melee attack, which hits fairly regularly, and that does 60 to 80 damage. But the other thing you have is if you don't move, you can use this adaptive targeting, and that will allow you to sacrifice your movement points, and you'll have 4 at baseline. So that allows you to get 3 armor piercing, which brings this up to 6, and then it'll also give you 20% critical hit chance. So then this guy can actually do some reasonable damage to some vehicles between that follow-up poison damage and the acid spray here, and then it can hit multiple vehicles too, because it has 2 range. And then again, if you get them on an angle, you could potentially even put that acid penalty to 3 different vehicles, doing 120 just the following turn, taking 3 acid stacks into consideration. So that can definitely work out very well for you. If you're on a relatively open map, I think the Thornback makes a great option. The reason is you can use that battering ram ability, and this is the most powerful charge attack in the game. Unfortunately, it is possible to miss that attack, so if you're in a situation where they might be able to have really good evasion, this could definitely let you down. But assuming you land the attack, I find it regularly does 3 figures, so it's usually doing over 100 damage pretty regularly. And then if there are any infantry in front of you, then you'll just charge right through it. Now it will do friendly fire too, so you want to make sure you don't have your weak tier units in front of this guy. But anybody charges through will suffer 30 to 40 damage with an armor piercing of 5, so even medium tier infantry can still take some pretty decent damage against this guy. And if somebody wants to fight him in melee, he will reflect some damage back. It's only 11 to 15, so it's not like amazing damage, but if there's but every little bit helps. Now this Devour with Brain Leech Worms, this is a poison ability. It doesn't really tell you this. But the other thing is it's also considered like a pistol attack. So if somebody charges the Thornback, and I'm not sure why they would, but if they did, this would trigger a reaction fire which can suppress the opponent to stop them from getting charged. And because if it's a poison, if it's an infantry, you'll get that bonus damage. And if you synapse that with the Toxic Presence of the Venom Thrope, that'll get you some bonus damage. But this is also one of the few matchups where it may make sense for you to spend that 20 points. You know, maybe some of those points that you're gonna get back from not giving that Death Splitter to your warriors to get the Death Splitter for this guy, because this will apply a acid penalty to vehicles as well. So if you can't quite get them into range, or there's an obstacle in your way, just go ahead and shoot them for 1 turn with the Death Splitter here, apply that acid, and then the following turn charge in there. And then this guy has 3 attacks, so he has really good accuracy, so even after you charge, you can tend to move around and do 3 attacks to suppress, and then he tends to be survivable enough that he can also give you some zone of control to help you mess up the vehicles further, or yeah, the tanks further. Some people really like the Exocrines. I'm not a huge fan of them. They usually are good for somewhere between 40 and 60 damage per shot per tank every turn. But most people tend to freak out when they see the Exocrine, and they focus fire him down pretty quickly. The nice thing about him, again, is if there are powerful infantry in front of you, you can use that plasmatic buildup and snipe them down. And then you can just keep shooting the bioplasmic cannon into the vehicle. And this does have pretty decent range. The big thing is you need to have synapse stuff close to this guy to help augment his accuracy, because you have to wait every 2 turns for this to go off. And with this kind of build and strategy, you're going to have your warriors forward to end up getting into melee, so they may not be close enough for the Exocrine to help get the benefits here. Likewise, the Biovore is a pretty decent option. Playing the Astra Militarum, the reason for that is the Spore Mine launchers do significant damage to the Imperial Guard that may be blocking your view. It also does decent damage against Castercrin, so you can end up really being a nuisance and almost wiping out the squads, allowing your warriors to be able to easily get a kill, just set off that natural killer ability and then finish them off. Likewise, if there's a point that you've captured, you can throw down some seed spores to try to lock down the point to force them to attack you and then blow it up. But the spore mines here are much weaker than your tier 3 ability, and therefore it's not going to do anything. I think it does like 20-30 damage to a tank, so really not worthwhile. They'll typically just move away and get killed. Now the big thing you got got to realize if you're using this, you don't want to have a bunch of other weak units around it, because when these guys die, they're considered a vehicle and they will blow up, and that will hurt you. And then, like I said, the Gene Stealers are definitely a decent option. They also have 5 movement. They have more HP, so they're a little harder to kill. They have a little more evasion, especially if you bring multiple ones out. I mean, you can get upwards of 200 momentum gains and 20 evasion, which will bring them up to 25, which is nothing to sneeze at. But again, I think going more for numbers is a better way of doing it, because a heavy flamer attack to these guys is enough to typically squad wipe them. So I'd rather get almost 2 Hormagaunt squads for the cost of 1 Gene Stealer now. I think it's just a more prudent option. Units I tend not to bring are the Broodlord. I think this guy needs to be reworked myself. I mean, it's a shame because he actually is meant to be an anti-vehicle killer. And the reason for that is he's with this monstrous rending claws. You know, he has 8 armor piercing, he has 95 accuracy, so that means he's going to be doing 90 to 120, and he can do that twice, even more if he gets the flank attack, and he has 5 movements. But the problem is he tends to get sniped so easily, and you know, you'd think, oh, I'm going to use the Proxim ability here, and that'll get rid of any overwatches. It only has a range of 3, so most things are going to be shooting you before you end up getting this guy into combat. But if they increase the range to, you know, 5 for that, I think that would be totally transformational for this guy, because then he would actually have a better use. So then you could, you know, use this, take off a vehicle overwatch, and then charge in with the rest of your units, and then move them in the following turn, or even that turn, be able to move in there and get to start attacking. Because what could be cool is that if this guy became viable, you could then do Gene Stealer builds, which right now are just too expensive and typically not effective enough. But what you can do is, if you brought, you know, 2 of these Broodlords, then you get 2 evolved Brood Telepathies, which would give you 100% momentum gain plus 10 evasion. So now he's already up to 30. And then you end up having your other Gene Stealers over here, which then also get Brood Telepathy. And so now they're getting, you know, 20 evasion, 100 momentum here. They're getting another 100 from the evolved... what was it called again? Evolved Brood Telepathy. And then they're getting 10 there, so now you're up to 25, 35 evasion. Now all of a sudden, these Gene Stealers can be a little bit harder to hit, and you're getting 200 momentum gains, and you can get the swarm tactics going to increase their damage. That's how you would make a Gene Stealer build effective, but because the Broodlord is so expensive at almost 200 points, and he's so easily killed by the vehicles, I just cannot find him to be effective enough to be able to bring out. I just find that he gets sniped too much. So I don't bring him. Now, if you had a map that was not real open, then I think you could make an argument to bring the Prime with you, because he actually does pretty decent damage in melee. He has 7 armor piercing, he has 2 attacks, and if you end up getting a model kill, you can trigger that natural killer to increase his melee damage more. But most maps against the Astra Militarum are fairly open, and this guy is really easy to snipe at range, so he tends to get killed before he can ever make it into combat, in my experience, which is really unfortunate. So I tend not to bring him. Likewise, I don't bring the Pyovor either, because I just can never get him close enough to be able to use his attacks. Theoretically, he could be a good option, because you could use this Burning Spray, which will shave off 2 armor off of the vehicles and sticks around for 2 turns, but I can never get this guy close enough, and then while I'm trying to get him close, I'm bringing him near my other units, and then he tends to just get shot and killed and blow up and kill my units with me, so I never use that. So I hope that helps. I mean, this is a bit of a longer video for my faction versus factions summary, but it's because this is such a hard matchup. I'm just trying to give you guys some thought processes and how the dance to this match usually goes. And then the other thing is, I keep starting and stopping about the command abilities, but I've tried the tier 3 command ability several times against the Astra Militarum, and even when it hits, you know, it's only going to be doing maybe 40 to 50-ish damage to a tank. And the problem is, you know, it's totally RNG, because you'll summon in 3 or 4 on a 9 square quadrant. And if you blow up any of the tanks and those spore mines are next to the tank, then it's going to immediately be blown up, and so you just lost those attacks. And yes, you have zone of control issues, but they have such low HP that they either will just spray and kill it with one of the side weapons, or they'll just drive away and take the damage. So I think it just makes much more sense to get rid of that momentum to stop them from attacking you, and then also to drop their damage, because the momentum decreases their graze chance, and I think it increases the crit chance, or maybe it's accuracy. I can't remember now, but for those reasons, it's good to always keep nullifying that with the Imperial Guard so they can't mess you up as much. So I definitely recommend that. And then if you're playing as the Astra Militarum, you know, the big thing again is they're going to be wanting to snipe your high value targets, so just be aware of that. They're going to want to set up some infantry front line to be able to stop you from getting to their tanks. They're going to be bringing some flamers. You know, you expect to see some sentinels or some chimeras, something like that, or even tanks that have side sponsons as heavy flamers. So they're going to want you to group up, and if you do, they're just going to get kill after kill after kill. If they have a commissar and some guardsmen, then they're going to shoot the guardsmen in the head, get the momentum, so you want to make sure you're killing the commissars if they're out there to stop them from getting those massive momentum gains. And then remember to fear the Cadian infantry, because this is one of the few matchups where infantry are very effective build, because all those little guardsmen have crack grenades, which will be enough to take out, to squad wipe your termagants and almost squad wipe your hormagaunts or your gargoyles. Certainly two will kill these guys. If they have increased accuracy and a little damage output, they'll be able to easily put out significant amounts of damage against you, given the sheer amount of shots that they have. Their Kasrkins will be able to kill, you know, a lot of your units except for the most armored ones, so that can be a real nightmare as well. And then the other thing is they can bring a Basilisk out, so you got to be careful if you're doing a Swarm Tactics build, you don't have everybody all grouped together, because on turn 3, that Barrage ability is going to go off. And if you have everybody like in a 3x3 quadrant filled, then that guarantees that they're going to get 3 attacks on you. They're going to get some bonus damage when it spreads to adjacent squares, because that's how it works with the artillery barrage ability, and so that it's going to feed a ton of momentum to them, and then it's going to set them up for getting stacks to increase the accuracy and stuff too. So just be aware that that can happen. Now, if you're doing a strategic command point, they may want to use the Valkyrie pickup to either get their infantry out of danger, or to then deploy something like a commissar behind one of your high value targets and start getting rear melee attacks, because that'll break a zone of control and also do increased damage. Or they'll drop off like a guardsman to try to ninja cap a point on you. What I tend to find is most people focus on the tier 2 ability, doing some strafing runs, especially if you have some medium to high tier units all in a straight line. Otherwise, what will happen if they do a real heavy infantry build is you're going to be giving them so much command points that towards the end they're going to have that Death Streak and missile, and that will kill everything within a 3x3 quadrant, because it does, I think, 3 figures to whatever guy is on the center, and then it has a range of 2 of everything around it that'll take significant damage, and that's enough to do significant damage to your warriors, squad wipe your lower tier junk units, and also significantly damage these Hive Guards, and do moderate damage to these other high value targets. So just take that into consideration. Also, some people really like to bring out heavy weapon squad. Again, infantry are actually a viable build against the Tyranids because everything is so squishy for us. And then I typically see them bring rocket launchers. That way they have both crack and frag grenades. The frag grenades have a bunch of splash, so then they can squad wipe your low tier infantry. And if you have anybody higher tier, they'll switch to the crack and make sure that they get those kills, and they'll tend to be setting up. Occasionally I'll see people bring las cannons too, and those can be a real nightmare, because then if you're using your, you know, Trygons or a Hive Tyrant, something that's more important, and you're trying to get them engaged into combat, then if that las cannon is left open in the open area, they'll get shots onto you, and then that can practically almost one-shot some of these very important units. So that can be a real nightmare. That's what makes it so hard to fight the Astra Militarum. Is not a pretty much everything of the rest is really good at killing you. And then the other thing is to take into consideration is if you see a psyker, try to snipe those guys down, because there's nothing worse than them using that psychic maelstrom right in front of their tanks, especially if there's a choke point, because then even with your increased movement, you typically don't have enough to close the distance and then get out of that maelstrom storm, because I think that does 30 damage to any units that are left within there that are enemy units, and that's enough again to usually squad wipe some of our more powerful, or some of our lower tier infantry. You know, it's gonna squad wipe these guys, do 3/4 of the damage here, and then squad wipe your gargoyles. So it's just a real pain in the ass. So do take those things into consideration when you're doing this matchup. But I hope that helps. Like I said, it's definitely one of the hardest matchups in the game, and it can be very, very frustrating. It's almost like you need to be playing against a player that doesn't quite know what he's doing, or gets a bad RNG roll, and then you're able to move in there and attack them and close the distance. And then the other thing I forgot to mention is typically, because they're going to be doing that pound them to dust strategy, you'll want to have your low tier infantry in front of your higher tier infantry, so if he tries to snipe your high tier targets, he has to shoot through all the weak guys, which will lower the accuracy, or he'll just waste a bunch of attacks killing you. Now, I will say, after the last patch, this is a well, I shouldn't say slightly, I'd say it's moderately easier, because it's nullified the amount of tank commanders they can bring. Is almost always with 2,000 points, people were bringing 2 tank commanders, and then, you know, doing a double Rogaldorn build. I think you all know that I love that build. That's like my favorite build. But now you can only have 1 tank commander, and that becomes very useful for you, because what tends to happen is people will bring 1 tank commander, and they tend to not bring another HQ unit. So once you can get that first kill, and you'll want to prioritize them anyways, because, you know, the blitz ability will allow them to, you know, charge through with their vehicles and really mess you up anyways. But if you get that kill, then they don't have those command points going anymore, and you can just totally nullify the whole command point aspect of the match. And if your HQ commander stays alive, then you don't have to worry about it. But it's definitely challenging. But now that they can only bring 1 out on a 2,000 point matchup, they tend to just go Predator or Sentinel or Chimera heavy. So I hope that helps. Thanks for watching, and if there are faction versus faction videos you want me to create, I will work on uploading those. But like I said, the next thing I want to do on these Tuesday, Thursday videos is start going through the Adepta Sororitas units again, just because I have to rework that whole playlist, because those units have changed so dramatically. It's like not even the same faction anymore. To help newer players, because the Adepta Sororitas are already, I think, the hardest faction to play, and now they're going to be even harder because there's just so many abilities that they can do. But from what I've done so far, I really like the Adepta Sororitas change, and I think it's really good, but I think it's just going to need some explanation to really help some of the newer players know how to use them, because I think they're going to be a little overwhelmed. So thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos, and I hope that this is what you were looking for. I apologize for it being probably one of the longer faction versus faction videos, but there's just so much to say about this matchup because it's so challenging. If you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe. It encourages me to post more content for you. Take it easy, guys.